I sat frozen in the break room watching my coworkers tear open their bonus envelopes like excited children on Christmas morning. The familiar sounds of celebration filled the air around me, while my own sealed envelope lay untouched on the scratched table surface. 20 minutes earlier, Janet from Human Resources had approached me with an expression I'd never seen before, her usually cheerful demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like fear. She'd whispered urgently about an $80,000 adjustment that required a private discussion the following day. Now surrounded by my colleagues' joyful laughter and vacation planning, I felt completely disconnected from their happiness, knowing that something was terribly wrong. That evening, I drove home to my small apartment in Lincoln Park, my mind racing with possibilities about what Janet's cryptic message could mean. The bonus envelope felt heavy in my purse, almost burning through the leather as I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my door. My cat Whiskers greeted me with his usual demanding meow, but I barely noticed as I set the envelope on my kitchen counter and stared at it for what felt like hours. When I finally worked up the courage to open it, my hands trembled as I unfolded the check. Instead of the $15,000 I'd been expecting based on my performance metrics and company guidelines, the amount read $95,000. I blinked hard, certain my tired eyes were playing tricks on me, but the numbers remained unchanged. My first instinct was to call the bank's automated line to verify the deposit. The robotic voice confirmed what I feared most. The full amount had already been processed and was sitting in my checking account. I hung up and immediately called back, hoping for a different answer, but received the same mechanical confirmation. Panic began to set in as the reality of the situation hit me. This wasn't just a clerical error that could be easily corrected with a phone call. Someone had deliberately deposited an enormous sum of money into my account, and I had absolutely no idea why or who was responsible. The implications for my career were devastating. At best, I'd be seen as incompetent for not catching such a massive mistake, and at worst, I could be accused of fraud or embezzlement. I'd worked incredibly hard to get where I was at Morrison & Associates, one of Chicago's most respected digital marketing firms. 3 years ago, I'd started as a junior coordinator fresh out of college with a degree in communications and mountains of student debt. Through countless late nights, weekend projects, and sheer determination, I climbed to senior coordinator status while simultaneously earning my MBA through evening classes. My success hadn't come easy. Growing up in small-town Millerville, Ohio, I'd watched my parents struggle to make ends meet on my father's factory wages and my mother's part-time job at the local diner. When Dad was diagnosed with diabetes 2 years ago, their medical bills skyrocketed, and I'd been sending them $500 every month to help cover costs. My mother always protested when I sent the checks, insisting they could manage on their own, but I knew better. I'd seen the stack of medical bills on their kitchen table during my last visit home. The money I'd been saving for a house down payment had taken me 4 years to accumulate. Every dollar came from careful budgeting, skipping dinners out, and buying generic groceries instead of name brands. I'd finally saved enough for a modest condo in a decent neighborhood, something that would give me stability and a sense of real accomplishment. But now, staring at this inexplicable bonus, I felt like everything I'd worked for was slipping away. My boyfriend Marcus had been pressuring me for months to move in with him to his upscale apartment in River North, arguing that it would save us both money and strengthen our relationship. The truth was, I wasn't ready for that level of commitment. Something about his attitude toward money and success made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what bothered me. Marcus worked in pharmaceutical sales and made good money, but he seemed to think success was just about having the right image and making the right connections. When I told him about working weekends to prepare client presentations or studying for my MBA exams, he'd roll his eyes and suggest I was trying too hard. His reaction tonight would be telling. Would he be concerned about the implications, or would he see this as an opportunity? My closest friend at work, Amanda Chen, had received her bonus envelope at the same time as everyone else. She'd texted me a photo of her check. Exactly $15,000, precisely what our performance reviews had indicated we should expect. Amanda and I had started at the company within weeks of each other and had supported each other through every challenge and promotion. If she'd received the correct amount, why had mine been so drastically different? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this wasn't a simple accounting error. Someone had specifically targeted me for this massive overpayment, but their motivations remained completely unclear. As I sat in my kitchen watching the city lights twinkle through my window, I realized that tomorrow's conversation with Janet might be the most important discussion of my professional life. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay in bed running through every possible scenario, from innocent mistakes to elaborate schemes involving identity theft or money laundering. By morning, I'd convinced myself that my career at Morrison & Associates was effectively over, regardless of how this situation resolved itself. I arrived at the office 45 minutes early, hoping to catch Janet before the regular workday chaos began. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt endless, my stomach churning with anxiety about the conversation ahead. But when I reached Janet's corner office in the Human Resources Department, I found something that made my blood run cold. The office was completely empty, not just unoccupied, but stripped bare. Janet's desk, which had always been covered with family photos, motivational calendars, and stacks of employee files, was now completely clean. Her computer was missing from the desk, leaving only disconnected cables and an outline in the dust where it had sat. The filing cabinet stood open and empty, their contents vanished without explanation. I stood in the doorway trying to process what I was seeing. 24 hours ago, Janet had been her usual, bustling, organized, self-handling bonus distributions and scheduling performance reviews. Now her office looked like it had been abandoned for months. Tom Rodriguez. The building's head of security appeared behind me, his former police detective instincts clearly pinging at my confused expression. Tom was in his late 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He'd joined Morrison & Associates 6 months ago after retiring from the Chicago Police Department, where he'd specialized in white-collar crime investigations. "Looking for Janet?" he asked, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "She asked me to meet her this morning," I replied, still staring at the empty office. "What happened here?" Tom glanced around to make sure we were alone, then stepped closer. "Janet turned in her resignation yesterday afternoon, effective immediately, packed up her things and left around 4:30 right after the bonus distribution ended. Didn't give any explanation to Patricia or anyone else in management." Patricia Sullivan was Morrison & Associates' CEO and founder, a brilliant woman in her early 60s who'd built the company from a one-person operation in her garage to a 150-employee firm with offices in 3 cities. Patricia was known for her hands-on management style and personal relationships with employees. The fact that Janet had quit without speaking to her was completely out of character. "Did she leave a forwarding address or contact information?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Tom shook his head grimly. "That's where things get interesting. I tried calling her cell phone this morning to ask about some employee files she'd been handling. The number's been disconnected. Her emergency contact information leads to an address that doesn't exist. I checked with the Postal Service." The implications of Tom's words hit me like a physical blow. Janet hadn't just quit her job. She'd disappeared completely, covering her tracks in a way that suggested careful planning rather than a spontaneous decision. "There's something else," Tom continued, lowering his voice further. I've been reviewing the security footage from yesterday. Janet made several trips to the parking garage with boxes and bags more than what you'd expect from cleaning out a desk, and she wasn't alone during some of those trips. Before I could ask for more details, Derek Morrison, the company's digital marketing director, and my immediate supervisor rounded the corner with an expression of exaggerated concern. Derek was Patricia's nephew, a fact that everyone knew but nobody discussed openly. In his mid-30s, with perfectly styled hair and an expensive suit that screamed trust fund, Derek had always struck me as someone who'd inherited his position rather than earned it.
Lindsay, there you are.
Derek said, his tone overly friendly in a way that immediately put me on guard. I heard about the bonus situation. Don't worry about it. These things happen with new payroll software. I'll handle everything with the accounting department personally. Just write me a check for the overage amount, and we'll get this sorted out internally without involving anyone else. The speed with which Derek had appeared and his eagerness to handle my problem personally sent warning bells ringing in my head. How did he know about my bonus amount I hadn't told anyone except Marcus, and the envelope had been sealed when I left the office yesterday? I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I think I should speak with Janet first. She mentioned needing to discuss an $80,000 adjustment. Derek's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. Oh, Janet. Yes, unfortunate situation. Family emergency, you know how these things go. But like I said, I can take care of everything. No need to involve HR or accounting or anyone else for that matter. Tom had been watching this exchange with the focused attention of an experienced investigator, and I could see him mentally cataloging Derek's words and reactions. There was something in Tom's expression that suggested he'd seen behavior like this before, and it hadn't been innocent. Actually, I said, making a split-second decision that would change everything. I'd prefer to follow proper procedures. Could you help me understand who I should speak with now that Janet's unavailable? Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Really? Lindsay, there's no need to make this more complicated than it needs to be. Trust me, I handle these kinds of issues all the time. But Tom stepped forward before Derek could continue. I'll need to file a report about Janet's unexpected departure anyway. Lindsay, why don't we schedule some time this afternoon to discuss the timeline of events standard procedure when an employee leaves without proper transition? The look Derek shot at Tom was pure poison, quickly masked by his practiced smile. Of course, whatever you think is best, Tom. Lindsay, just let me know when you're ready to resolve this, and I'll make sure everything gets handled smoothly. As Derek walked away, Tom waited until he was completely out of earshot before speaking again. 27 years as a cop, and I learned to trust my gut about people. That man is lying about something, and whatever it is, it's connected to Janet's disappearance and your bonus situation. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine meetings and project updates, but my mind was entirely focused on the growing mystery surrounding Janet's departure and Derek's suspicious behavior. During lunch, I drove to Janet's apartment complex in Evanston, hoping to find some clue about her sudden disappearance. The building manager, a heavy-set woman in her 70s named Mrs. Kowalski, confirmed my worst fears. Janet had broken her lease and moved out 3 days ago, paying the penalty fees in cash and leaving no forwarding address. According to Mrs. Kowalski, Janet had seemed nervous and kept checking her phone as if she was expecting bad news. She was always such a reliable tenant, Mrs. Kowalski told me as we stood in the empty apartment that had been Janet's home for 4 years. Paid rent on time, never caused any problems. But these last few weeks, something was different. She seemed scared jumpy, asked me twice about the building's security cameras and whether they recorded the parking garage. As I drove back to the office, the pieces of a larger puzzle began forming in my mind. Janet's carefully planned disappearance. Derek's immediate offer to handle my bonus issue privately, and the mysterious $80,000 adjustment she'd mentioned, all pointed to something far more serious than a simple payroll error. That afternoon, I made copies of my bonus check and bank statement, securing them in my personal safe at home. Whatever was happening at Morrison and Associates, I was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant risking everything I'd worked so hard to achieve. The next morning brought revelations that shattered everything I thought I knew about my workplace and the people I trusted. Tom had spent the evening reviewing security footage, and what he'd discovered was far worse than either of us had imagined.
You need to see this,
Tom said, gesturing for me to join him in his small security office. The room was lined with monitors showing various angles of the building's interior and exterior. He pulled up footage from 3 weeks ago, the timestamp showing a late evening when most employees had already left. On the screen, I watched Derek unlock Janet's office with his master key and spend nearly an hour inside copying files and photographing documents. The next clip showed them meeting in the parking garage 2 days later, Derek handing Janet what appeared to be a thick envelope while she passed him a USB drive.
How many times did they meet like this?
I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer.
At least 12 times over the past 6 weeks.
Tom replied, clicking through more footage. Always after hours, always in locations where they thought they wouldn't be seen. But Derek made a crucial mistake. He forgot that his nephew status doesn't exempt him from security protocols. Every door access is logged, every movement tracked. The final piece of footage was the most damning. Taken just 2 days before the bonus distribution, it showed Derek and Janet in her office, both leaning over her computer screen. Janet was clearly distressed, shaking her head and pointing at the screen, while Derek appeared to be insisting on something. At one point, he grabbed her wrist when she tried to pull away from the keyboard.
She didn't want to do whatever he was asking,
I whispered, feeling sick as I watched Janet's obvious fear and Derek's increasingly aggressive posture.
Tom nodded grimly.
And now she's disappeared, leaving you holding evidence of what appears to be a systematic embezzlement scheme. Classic setup. The low-level employee takes the fall while the mastermind walks away clean. But Tom's investigation had revealed something even more disturbing. He'd spent years in financial crimes and recognized the pattern of what we were seeing. Using his contacts in banking and law enforcement, he'd uncovered irregularities in Morrison and Associates' financial records going back 18 months. Derek's been redirecting client payments into a separate account, Tom explained, showing me printouts of banking records that should have been impossible for him to access through normal channels. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there from large corporate clients who wouldn't notice immediately, but over time it escalated. The evidence was overwhelming. Derek had been using his position as digital marketing director to intercept payments from major clients claiming technical issues or processing delays while actually diverting funds to an account he controlled. Janet's access to payroll and HR systems had allowed him to manipulate records and cover his tracks.
The $80,000 in your bonus wasn't a mistake,
Tom continued. It was deliberately placed there to implicate you as the mastermind when the FBI investigation begins next week. Patricia filed a request for a federal audit after she noticed discrepancies in the quarterly reports. Derek knows he's running out of time. My hands trembled as the full scope of Derek's plan became clear. He'd been systematically stealing from the company while setting me up to take the blame. The promotion I'd worked so hard for, the respect I'd earned from colleagues, the financial security I'd built, all of it was about to be destroyed by someone I'd trusted.
There's more, Tom said quietly.
I ran background checks on 3 employees who were fired for financial irregularities over the past 2 years. Sarah Williams, Michael Torres, and Jennifer Park, all terminated for alleged theft or embezzlement. But when I looked deeper into their cases, the pattern matches exactly what's happening to you now. Each of the fired employees had been high performers who'd discovered inconsistencies in company finances. Each had received unexpected bonuses or had money deposited into their accounts just before being accused of theft. Each had tried to report their concerns to management only to find themselves fired and blacklisted from the industry. Derek's been doing this for years, I realized, feeling nauseous. Using good employees as scapegoats while he steals millions. The personal betrayals were equally devastating. Amanda Chen, my closest friend at the company, had been feeding Derek information about my activities and schedule. When I confronted her in the break room, she broke down in tears, admitting that Derek had promised her my position if she helped him build a case against me. "He said you were planning to leave anyway," Amanda sobbed, unable to meet my eyes. "He said Patricia was looking for an excuse to downsize, and it was either going to be you or me. I have student loans, Lindsay. My parents are depending on me to help with my little brother's college tuition. I couldn't afford to lose this job." Even worse was Marcus's reaction when I told him about the investigation that evening. Instead of being supportive or concerned about my well-being, he immediately began calculating how we could benefit from the situation. $80,000, Lindsay. Do you understand what that means for our future? We could put a down payment on that condo in Lincoln Park, take a vacation to Europe, start building real wealth instead of just scraping by. Marcus, I could go to prison for this. Derek is framing me for embezzlement that he committed.
You're being paranoid,
he replied dismissively. Corporate accounting errors happen all the time. Nobody's going to prison over a bonus calculation mistake. Just keep the money and let Derek handle the paperwork. Why are you always looking for problems? That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I realized how isolated Derek's scheme had left me. My closest friend had betrayed me. My boyfriend was more concerned with money than my freedom, and my family was too far away to provide meaningful support. The one person who seemed genuinely committed to helping me was Tom, a man I barely knew who'd risked his own position to uncover the truth. But Tom's revelation the next morning provided the motivation I needed to fight back. He'd discovered that Derek's plan was even more elaborate than we'd realized. The FBI audit wasn't random. Derek had triggered it himself by filing an anonymous tip about suspicious financial activity, specifically mentioning my name and employee identification number.
He's been planning this for months,
Tom explained. The audit will begin Monday morning, and Derek's already prepared evidence that points directly to you. Bank records, forged authorization documents, even a resignation letter with your signature that Janet was supposed to submit after the scandal broke. The resignation letter was the final straw. Seeing my name forged on a document that would have ended my career while absolving Derek of all responsibility filled me with a rage I'd never experienced before. This wasn't just about money or career advancement. Derek was methodically destroying innocent people's lives to cover his own crimes. "What do we do?" I asked Tom, surprised by the strength in my own voice. Tom smiled grimly.
"We gather evidence that will hold up in court, and we make sure Derek's plan backfires in the most spectacular way possible.
But we need to move fast. Once that FBI audit begins, it'll be much harder to prove your innocence." The fight for my life and career was about to begin, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt ready to take on Derek Morrison and win. The next 72 hours became the most intense period of my life, as Tom and I worked systematically to build a case that would not only clear my name, but expose Derek's years-long criminal enterprise. What started as a desperate attempt to save my career quickly evolved into something much larger. A mission to seek justice for everyone Derek had victimized. Our first breakthrough came through Tom's law enforcement connections. Detective Maria Santos from the Chicago Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit had worked with Tom for 15 years before his retirement. When Tom explained our situation, Detective Santos agreed to review our evidence unofficially, provided we could present concrete proof rather than circumstantial suspicions.
Financial fraud cases live or die on documentation, Detective Santos explained during our clandestine meeting at a coffee shop in Wicker Park. You need bank records, email communications, and witness testimony that establishes a clear timeline of criminal activity. Without that foundation, all you have is a workplace dispute. Tom had already begun gathering the necessary evidence through methods that walked the fine line between investigation and invasion of privacy. His access to Morrison and Associates' security systems provided crucial footage of Derek's activities, while his knowledge of computer forensics allowed him to recover deleted files from Janet's abandoned workstation. The deleted files were a goldmine of incriminating evidence. Janet had been meticulously documenting Derek's instructions, apparently hoping to protect herself if the scheme was discovered. Her hidden folder contained copies of Derek's emails, directing her to manipulate payroll records, screenshots of the false accounting entries, and even recorded phone conversations where Derek threatened her job if she didn't comply. She was building an insurance policy, Tom observed as we reviewed Janet's documentation. Smart woman. She knew Derek would eventually try to blame her for everything. But Janet's records revealed something even more disturbing than we'd anticipated. Derek's embezzlement operation was far more extensive than simple client payment diversions. He'd been manipulating employee benefits, redirecting insurance payments, and even stealing from the company's retirement fund contributions. The total amount of his theft approached $2.4 million over 3 years. Armed with this evidence, I made the difficult decision to approach Patricia Sullivan directly. As the company's founder and CEO, she had the authority to halt the FBI audit and cooperate with a proper investigation. More importantly, she had the resources to protect potential witnesses like Janet, who was clearly hiding rather than simply disappearing. Patricia's reaction when I presented our findings was a mixture of fury, heartbreak, and determination. She'd built Morrison and Associates from nothing, treating her employees like family and priding herself on the company's ethical reputation. Learning that her own nephew had been systematically stealing from the business and destroying innocent careers was devastating. That boy, she said quietly, staring at the evidence spread across her conference room table. I gave him everything. Paid for his college education, brought him into the company, promoted him despite warnings from other family members about his character. And this is how he repays not just me, but every person who works here. Patricia's support transformed our investigation from a defensive scramble into a coordinated offensive operation. She authorized Tom to conduct a complete forensic audit of the company's financial systems while providing legal protection for anyone willing to testify against Derek. Most importantly, she used her connections to locate Janet Rodriguez, who had been hiding with relatives in Phoenix, terrified that Derek would retaliate if she came forward. Janet's return to Chicago provided the final pieces of evidence we needed. During a tearful reunion in Patricia's office, she revealed the full scope of Derek's manipulation and threats. He'd discovered her gambling debts from a period of personal crisis 2 years earlier and used that information to coerce her participation in his scheme. He said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure I was fired and prosecuted for the money I'd borrowed from petty cash to pay my creditors, Janet explained through tears. I'd already paid back every penny, but Derek said he could make it look like ongoing theft. I was trapped. Derek's manipulation of Janet followed the same pattern he'd used with other victims. He identified personal vulnerabilities, financial stress, family obligations, career ambitions, and exploited them to ensure cooperation and silence. Amanda Chen's betrayal of our friendship suddenly made sense in this context. Derek had convinced her that reporting on my activities was necessary for her own survival. But Derek had made a crucial mistake in his treatment of Amanda. Instead of simply using her as an information source, he'd begun pressuring her to plant evidence in my desk and computer files.
When Amanda realized the true scope of what Derek was asking, she became terrified of being charged as an accomplice in a federal crime. Amanda's decision to become a witness for our side provided crucial testimony about Derek's methods and timeline. She could verify that Derek had specifically targeted me months before the bonus incident, gradually building a case against me while simultaneously escalating his theft from company accounts. The most powerful testimony came from Patricia's investigation into the 3 employees Derek had previously framed for financial crimes. Sarah Williams, Michael Torres, and Jennifer Park had all struggled to rebuild their careers after being fired from Morrison and Associates under false accusations. When Patricia reached out to them with evidence of Derek's deception, they were eager to participate in exposing the truth. "Derek destroyed my reputation in this industry," Sarah Williams told us during a conference call from her new home in Seattle. "I've been working retail for 2 years because no marketing firm will hire me. If there's a chance to clear my name and stop him from doing this to anyone else, I'll testify to whatever you need." Our growing coalition of witnesses and evidence created an overwhelming case against Derek. But Tom warned us that Derek wasn't likely to surrender quietly. His family connections and financial resources made him dangerous, especially if he realized his scheme was about to collapse. "Men like Derek Morrison don't accept responsibility for their crimes," Tom explained during one of our strategy sessions. "When cornered, they become desperate and unpredictable. We need to be prepared for him to escalate his attacks on Lindsay and anyone else who threatens him." Tom's warning proved prescient when Derek began making subtle threats against my family in Ohio. Anonymous calls to my parents' home warned them about their daughter's criminal activities and suggested they should encourage me to cooperate with authorities to avoid prosecution. The psychological pressure was clearly designed to isolate me and force a confession to crimes I hadn't committed. But Derek's intimidation tactics only strengthened my resolve. My parents' unwavering faith in my integrity provided emotional support during the most difficult moments of our investigation. My father's response to Derek's anonymous threats was particularly powerful. "Lindsay Marie," he said during one of our nightly phone calls, "I've known you for 26 years, and I've never seen you take a shortcut or compromise your values for money or convenience. If someone's trying to convince me you're a thief, they clearly don't know the daughter your mother and I raised." As our investigation intensified, I discovered reserves of strength and leadership I'd never known I possessed. Coordinating witness interviews, analyzing financial records, and preparing legal documentation required skills I'd developed through my MBA studies, but never applied in such high-stakes circumstances. The experience also clarified my personal relationships in ways both painful and liberating. Marcus's continued focus on the financial benefits of my situation rather than the legal dangers revealed fundamental differences in our values that couldn't be overlooked. When I finally ended our relationship, I felt relief rather than sadness. "You're making a huge mistake," Marcus said during our final conversation. "You're throwing away $80,000 and a good relationship because you're too stubborn to accept that sometimes life gives you lucky breaks." "If you think being framed for embezzlement is a lucky break," I replied, "then we clearly don't share the same definition of luck or ethics." By Friday afternoon, our team had assembled a comprehensive case against Derek that included financial records, witness testimony, security footage, and documented evidence of his systematic targeting of innocent employees. Detective Santos had reviewed our findings and agreed to coordinate with federal investigators to ensure Derek's arrest and prosecution. "You've built a case that would make experienced investigators proud," she told us during our final preparation meeting. "Derek Morrison is going to face justice for his crimes, and every person he victimized will have the opportunity to rebuild their reputations and careers. But our most crucial advantage was timing. Derek remained convinced that his original plan was proceeding smoothly, unaware that his entire operation had been exposed and documented. The trap we'd set for Monday morning's board meeting would give him one final opportunity to incriminate himself while believing he was executing the final stage of his scheme against me. As I prepared for the confrontation that would determine my future, I reflected on how much I'd grown during this nightmare. The shy, cautious woman who'd sat in the break room just 1 week earlier had been replaced by someone willing to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for everyone Derek had wronged. Sunday night, our team gathered in Patricia's office to finalize preparations for what would become the most important Monday morning in Morrison and Associates history. The weight of everything we'd discovered and planned pressed down on all of us, but there was also an electric sense of anticipation. After years of Derek's criminal behavior, justice was finally within reach. Tom had worked through the weekend installing additional surveillance equipment throughout the office, focusing particularly on Derek's workspace and the areas where he typically conducted his secret meetings. Every camera angle was tested, every recording device checked twice. We would have irrefutable video evidence of whatever Derek attempted during the board meeting. Patricia had spent her weekend reviewing every detail of our evidence with the company's legal counsel, ensuring that our investigation methods would stand up to scrutiny in both civil and criminal proceedings. Her lawyer, David Kim, from the prestigious firm of Kim Wilson and Associates, had confirmed that our documentation was more than sufficient to support fraud charges against Derek.
I've seen federal prosecutors win cases with far less evidence than what you've assembled, David assured us during our Sunday evening meeting. Derek Morrison is going to prison, and every penny he stole will be recovered for restitution to his victims. But our most crucial preparation involved coordinating with Detective Santos and FBI Special Agent Rachel Morrison, who had been assigned to the case once its federal implications became clear. Agent Morrison, no relation to Derek, despite the shared surname, specialized in white-collar crime, and had successfully prosecuted dozens of embezzlement cases involving amounts similar to Derek's theft. The key to tomorrow's operation, Agent Morrison explained, is allowing Derek to incriminate himself through his own actions and words. We need him to attempt the final transfer, make statements admitting to the scheme, and ideally provide information about any accomplices we haven't yet identified. The plan we'd developed was elegant in its simplicity. Derek would arrive for the board meeting believing he was about to watch me be arrested for crimes he'd committed. Instead, he would find himself walking into a carefully orchestrated trap designed to capture his confession and final criminal acts. Tom would be monitoring all surveillance equipment from his security office, recording every moment of Derek's arrival and subsequent activities. Patricia would be wearing a wire provided by the FBI, capturing any private conversations Derek might attempt with her before the meeting began. Agent Morrison and Detective Santos would be stationed in the building, but out of sight, ready to make arrests once sufficient evidence had been gathered. My role was perhaps the most challenging. I needed to act natural and unsuspecting, allowing Derek to believe his plan was succeeding while actually feeding him rope to hang himself with. The psychological pressure was enormous, knowing that everything I'd worked for depended on my ability to remain calm under Derek's manipulation. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the weather matching the somber mood of our mission. I arrived at the office at my usual time, maintaining the routine I'd followed throughout our investigation. Several colleagues noticed my apparent nervousness and attributed it to anxiety about the ongoing bonus situation, exactly the impression we wanted to create. Derek arrived 30 minutes early for the 9 o'clock board meeting, his expensive suit and confident demeanor masking what we now knew to be desperate criminal intent. Tom watched from his monitors as Derek accessed his office computer and began what appeared to be final preparations for a major financial transaction. The security cameras captured Derek logging into multiple offshore banking accounts, reviewing transfer protocols and printing documents that he immediately locked in his desk drawer. His movements were quick and nervous, constantly checking his phone and looking toward the hallway as if expecting interruption. At 8:45, Derek made his move. He accessed the company's main financial system using administrative credentials that should have been impossible for him to possess. Tom watched in real time as Derek initiated a transfer of $215,000 from the company's operating account to one of his offshore holdings.
"He's doing it,"
Tom whispered into his radio communication with our team.
"Complete financial transaction in progress, fully documented by our surveillance systems."
But Derek's most incriminating act was still to come. As he prepared to leave his office for the board meeting, he placed a phone call that our wiretapping equipment captured in its entirety. The conversation was with an unknown accomplice, clearly someone involved in the money laundering operation that had allowed Derek to hide his stolen funds.
"Everything's in place,"
Derek said into his phone. "The transfer is complete, and our little accounting problem will be resolved within the hour. Lindsay Williams is about to confess to embezzlement she didn't commit, and I'll be the hero who uncovered her crimes." The unknown voice on the other end of the call expressed concern about the FBI audit and whether Derek was confident in his plan. Derek's response revealed the full scope of his arrogance and contempt for his victims. "These people are sheep," Derek laughed.
"I've been stealing from them for 3 years, and they never suspected anything until I wanted them to. Lindsay's so naive she actually thinks someone made a mistake with her bonus. When the FBI shows her the evidence I've prepared, she'll confess just to avoid a lengthy trial."
At 9:00 sharp, Derek entered the main conference room where Patricia was waiting with David Kim and 2 other board members who'd been briefed on the situation. I was seated at the far end of the table, playing my role as the confused employee seeking answers about her bonus discrepancy. Derek's performance was masterful, expressing concern about the company's financial irregularities while subtly directing suspicion toward me. He presented forged documents that appeared to show my authorization of the illegal transfers, complete with signatures that would have fooled anyone without expert analysis.
"I hate to say this about a colleague,"
Derek said with false regret,
"but the evidence clearly shows that Lindsay has been manipulating our payroll and client payment systems for months. The $80,000 bonus was obviously intended as her final theft before disappearing with the money."
Patricia played her role perfectly, expressing shock and disappointment while encouraging Derek to explain how he'd discovered my supposed crimes. Each question she asked prompted Derek to provide more details about the scheme, inadvertently confessing to intimate knowledge of criminal activities only the true perpetrator would possess. The crucial moment came when Derek offered to personally handle my arrest and the recovery of stolen funds, claiming his relationship with federal investigators would expedite the process. His eagerness to control every aspect of the investigation revealed his desperation to prevent any real scrutiny of the evidence.
"I think it's best if we handle this internally initially,"
Derek suggested. "I can work with Lindsay to arrange full restitution and her resignation, avoiding the publicity and expense of a federal prosecution. Sometimes the most ethical approach is also the most practical." But Derek's final miscalculation was attempting to manipulate me directly. As the meeting progressed, he began speaking to me with condescending sympathy, offering to help minimize my legal exposure if I cooperated with his version of events.
"Lindsay, I know you're scared, but this doesn't have to destroy your life,"
Derek said with fake compassion. "If you admit what you've done and agree to pay back the money, I'm confident we can work something out that avoids prison time." That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Looking Derek directly in the eyes, I responded with words that had been carefully chosen to elicit his most incriminating response.
"Derek, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding.
I never authorized any financial transfers or manipulated any company systems. If money has been stolen from Morrison and Associates, we need to find the real criminal responsible. Derek's mask slipped completely at my response. His face flushed with anger as he realized I wasn't going to confess to crimes I hadn't committed. In his fury, he made the mistake that sealed his fate. Stop lying, Lindsay. I have documentation of every transaction you authorized, every system you accessed, every dollar you stole. You're not going to ruin my reputation by pretending to be innocent when I've spent months gathering evidence of your crimes. The conference room fell silent as Derek realized what he'd just admitted. Only the actual thief would have months of detailed knowledge about financial crimes supposedly committed by someone else. His outburst had revealed not just guilt, but premeditation and elaborate planning that contradicted his claims of recently discovering my alleged theft. Patricia activated the silent alarm that summoned FBI agents into the conference room, while Tom's security footage captured Derek's complete breakdown as he realized his scheme had failed. Detective Santos and Agent Morrison entered with arrest warrants for embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering charges that would ensure Derek faced decades in federal prison. As handcuffs were placed on Derek's wrists, he made one final desperate attempt to blame me for his crimes. But his own recorded words and the overwhelming evidence we'd gathered made his protests sound like the ravings of a desperate man facing the consequences of years of criminal behavior.
"This isn't over,"
Derek snarled as he was led away.
"My family has connections you can't imagine. I'll be out of custody before you finish the paperwork."
Agent Morrison's response perfectly captured the justice that was finally being served.
"Mr. Morrison, your family connections won't help you when you're facing federal charges supported by video evidence, financial records, and witness testimony. You're going to prison for a very long time."
As the conference room cleared and the immediate crisis ended, I felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and triumph unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The nightmare that had threatened to destroy my life was finally over, but more importantly, justice was being served for every person Derek had victimized over the years. The weeks following Derek's arrest transformed not only my life but the entire culture at Morrison and Associates. The FBI investigation moved with remarkable speed, aided by the comprehensive evidence our team had gathered and Derek's own recorded confessions during the board meeting confrontation. Agent Morrison kept us informed about the progress of the federal case, and the scope of Derek's criminal enterprise continued to expand as investigators followed the money trail through offshore accounts and shell companies. The final tally of Derek's theft reached $2.7 million over 4 years, making it one of the largest corporate embezzlement cases in Illinois state history. Derek's attempts to use family connections and expensive lawyers to escape prosecution failed spectacularly when the evidence against him proved overwhelming. His recorded phone call discussing the frame job against me, combined with video footage of him conducting illegal transfers, left no room for reasonable doubt about his guilt. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court revealed Derek's complete lack of remorse for his victims, and his continued belief that he was entitled to steal from the company his aunt had built. Dr. Patricia Chen, the forensic psychologist who evaluated Derek, described him as a textbook case of narcissistic personality disorder combined with antisocial tendencies that made him dangerous to anyone who threatened his schemes. Derek Morrison views other people as tools to be used for his benefit, Dr. Chen explained during the sentencing hearing. He has no capacity for empathy or guilt regarding the lives he's destroyed. The only emotion he's displayed throughout this process is anger that he was caught. Derek's sentencing brought a sense of closure that I'd been craving for months. Federal Judge Maria Rodriguez sentenced him to 23 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the first 15 years. The sentence included full restitution to Morrison and Associates,
and individual compensation for the employees whose careers Derek had destroyed through his frame jobs. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Rodriguez said during the sentencing hearing, "your crimes represent a profound betrayal of trust that damaged not only a family business, but the lives of innocent people who had the misfortune to work alongside you. Your elaborate schemes to frame innocent employees for your own crimes demonstrate a level of callousness that requires significant punishment." Janet Rodriguez faced much more lenient consequences due to her cooperation with investigators and the clear evidence of Derek's coercion and threats. She received 3 years probation and community service, along with counseling to address the gambling addiction that Derek had exploited to force her participation in his scheme. "Janet was a victim of Derek's manipulation just as much as anyone else," Agent Morrison explained. "Her decision to document his instructions and ultimately cooperate with our investigation was crucial to securing his conviction. But the most satisfying aspect of Derek's downfall was watching the lives he'd destroyed begin to rebuild and flourish." Sarah Williams returned to Chicago and accepted a senior marketing position at a prestigious firm that had been eager to hire her once her name was cleared. Michael Torres started his own consulting business with a loan program designed for professionals who'd faced wrongful termination. Jennifer Park enrolled in law school, inspired by our case to become an advocate for white-collar crime victims. Patricia's response to the crisis demonstrated the leadership qualities that had made Morrison and Associates successful in the first place. Rather than simply trying to move past the scandal, she used Derek's crimes as an opportunity to implement comprehensive reforms that would prevent future embezzlement and protect employees who reported suspicious activities. The company hired Tom Rodriguez as the permanent director of security and compliance, giving him the authority and resources to monitor all financial transactions and investigate any irregularities. Patricia also established a whistleblower protection program that provided legal representation and financial support for employees who reported suspected crimes. Derek's betrayal taught me that family relationships can't substitute for proper oversight and accountability, Patricia told the company during an all-hands meeting 6 weeks after Derek's arrest. "We're implementing systems that will ensure nothing like this ever happens again, while creating a culture where ethical behavior is valued above everything else." The most unexpected recognition came when the Illinois Attorney General's office asked me to speak at conferences about corporate fraud prevention and employee protection. My story resonated with audiences because it demonstrated how ordinary people could fight back against sophisticated criminal schemes when they had proper support and resources. "Lindsay Williams represents everything that's right about American business ethics," Attorney General Lisa Rodriguez said during one such conference. Her courage in exposing Derek Morrison's crimes protected not only her own career, but countless future victims who might have faced similar frame jobs. The speaking engagements led to consulting opportunities with companies that wanted to improve their internal controls and fraud detection systems. What started as a desperate fight to save my career had evolved into a new profession helping organizations protect themselves and their employees from white-collar criminals. But the most meaningful change was the growth in my personal relationships and self-confidence. The crisis had revealed which people truly cared about my well-being versus those who were simply interested in what I could provide for them. Marcus's focus on financial gain, rather than my legal safety, had shown me that our relationship was fundamentally hollow. The end of that relationship cleared the path for something much better. Tom Rodriguez and I had developed a deep friendship during our investigation that gradually evolved into romantic feelings based on mutual respect and shared values. Our relationship grew out of the most challenging period of my life, which created a foundation of trust and understanding that I'd never experienced before. "I fell in love with your courage before I fell in love with you," Tom told me during one of our quiet dinners together.
Watching you fight for justice, even when it meant risking everything, showed me the kind of person you really are. My relationship with my parents also deepened as they saw me navigate the crisis with integrity and determination. The anonymous threats Derek had made against them only strengthened their pride in my character and their faith in my ability to overcome any challenge. "We raised you to do the right thing even when it's difficult," my father said during one of his visits to Chicago. "Seeing you stand up to someone who tried to destroy you makes us prouder than any career success could." The financial impact of Derek's crimes was completely reversed through the restitution process, and Patricia's generous compensation for the trauma her nephew had caused. The money I had saved for a house down payment was returned along with additional compensation that allowed me to purchase the condo in Lincoln Park I'd been dreaming about. But more importantly, Patricia offered me Derek's former position as digital marketing director, with a salary increase that reflected both the expanded responsibilities and my proven leadership during the crisis. The promotion felt like genuine recognition for my abilities, rather than sympathy for what I'd endured. "You've earned this position through your performance over 3 years, and your handling of Derek's crimes proves you have the character and judgment we need in leadership," Patricia explained during our private meeting about the promotion. "I hope you'll consider staying with Morrison and Associates for many years to come." 6 months after Derek's arrest, Morrison and Associates had not only recovered from the scandal, but had become stronger and more ethical than ever before. Our client relationships actually improved as companies appreciated our transparency about the crisis and the comprehensive reforms we'd implemented to prevent future problems. The company's reputation for integrity attracted new clients who specifically wanted to work with an organization that had proven its commitment to ethical business practices. Revenue increased by 30% as word spread about our fraud prevention systems and the quality of our leadership team. As I settled into my new office, formerly Derek's domain, I reflected on how completely my life had changed in less than a year. The shy, cautious coordinator who'd sat frozen in the break room had been replaced by a confident leader who understood her own strength and wasn't afraid to use it for good. The bonus check that had started this entire nightmare was framed on my wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how quickly life can change and how important it is to fight for justice even when the odds seem overwhelming. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the lesson that had emerged from the darkest period of my career. 1 year later, I stood in the living room of my new condo in Lincoln Park, watching the sunset paint Chicago's skyline in shades of gold and amber. The floor-to-ceiling windows provided a perfect view of the city that had tested me in ways I never could have imagined, but had ultimately become the place where I discovered my true strength and purpose. The past 12 months had brought changes I couldn't have dreamed of when I first opened that fateful bonus envelope. Morrison and Associates had not only survived Derek's betrayal, but had emerged as a leader in corporate ethics and fraud prevention. The reforms we implemented became a model for other companies, and our reputation for integrity attracted clients from across the Midwest. My role as digital marketing director had evolved into something far more meaningful than managing advertising campaigns and social media strategies. I'd become the company's unofficial advocate for employee protection and ethical business practices, a responsibility that energized me in ways my previous work never had. The speaking engagements and consulting opportunities continued to grow, taking me to conferences in New York, Los Angeles, and Atlanta, where I shared our story with audiences of business leaders, law enforcement officials, and advocacy groups. Each presentation reinforced my belief that one person's courage to stand up against corruption could inspire systemic change. Tom and I had moved in together 6 months earlier, our relationship having grown from professional alliance to deep partnership built on mutual respect and shared values.
His transition from security director to my life partner felt natural and right in ways that my relationship with Marcus never had. We supported each other's careers while building a home filled with laughter, trust, and genuine affection. I never expected to find love in the middle of a criminal investigation, Tom often joked during dinner parties with friends. But watching Lindsay fight for justice made me realize I wanted to spend my life supporting someone that brave and principled. My relationship with my parents had also transformed through our shared experience of Derek's threats and my ultimate triumph. They visited Chicago regularly, now proud to see the life I'd built and the career I'd developed through my own integrity and determination. Their unwavering faith in my character during the darkest moments of the investigation had sustained me through doubts and fears. The financial security I'd gained through the promotion and consulting work allowed me to help my parents in ways that went beyond monthly support checks. When my father's diabetes required specialized treatment that insurance didn't cover, I was able to pay for his care without compromising my own stability. The ability to support my family while building my own future felt like genuine success. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the network of relationships I'd developed with other fraud victims and whistleblowers. Sarah Williams, Michael Torres. Jennifer Park and I had formed an informal support group that met monthly to share experiences and provide encouragement for others facing similar challenges. We all thought we were alone when these things happened to us, Sarah reflected during one of our gatherings. But Lindsay's courage in exposing Derek showed us that we could fight back and win. Now we're helping other people realize they don't have to be victims. Janet Rodriguez had become one of our most dedicated advocates, using her experience with Derek's coercion to counsel other employees who found themselves pressured to participate in illegal activities. Her transformation from frightened accomplice to confident advocate demonstrated the healing power of taking action against injustice. Derek's imprisonment had been far from comfortable. Reports from the federal facility where he was serving his sentence indicated that his narcissistic personality and complete lack of remorse made him unpopular with both inmates and staff. His appeals had all been denied, and legal experts predicted he would serve his full 23-year sentence. Derek Morrison represents the worst of white-collar criminals, Agent Morrison explained during one of our periodic updates. His complete lack of empathy for his victims and his continued belief that he was entitled to steal from his family's business make him an ongoing danger to society. The recovery of Derek's stolen funds had allowed Morrison and Associates to establish a victim compensation program that provided financial assistance to anyone who'd suffered career damage due to corporate fraud. The program had already helped dozens of wrongfully terminated employees rebuild their lives and careers. Patricia's leadership during and after the crisis had earned her recognition as one of Chicago's most ethical business leaders. She'd been invited to serve on government committees examining corporate fraud prevention and had testified before Congress about the need for stronger whistleblower protection laws. Derek's crimes taught me that success without integrity is ultimately meaningless, Patricia told a gathering of business leaders. The reforms we implemented at Morrison and Associates haven't just prevented future fraud, they've made us a better company in every way. As I prepared dinner for Tom and myself that evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The terrified woman who'd sat in Patricia's conference room facing Derek's accusations seemed like a different person now, someone I remembered fondly but could barely recognize in myself. The bonus check that had started everything was still framed in my office, but its meaning had evolved from a symbol of danger to a reminder of personal strength. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the most important lesson I'd learned through this experience. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst betrayals.
Derek's attempt to destroy my career had actually freed me from a life of playing it safe and accepting limitations others tried to impose on me. His crimes had revealed reserves of courage and leadership I never knew I possessed, abilities that now defined my professional and personal identity. The house I'd dreamed of buying had become a home filled with love and purpose. The career I'd almost lost had evolved into a calling that allowed me to help others while building something meaningful. The relationships that had been tested by crisis had emerged stronger and more authentic than ever before. As Tom and I sat down to dinner, he raised his glass in a toast that had become our evening ritual. To surviving Derek Morrison and becoming the people we were meant to be. To learning that our greatest strength comes from fighting for what's right, I replied, clinking my glass against his. Outside our windows, Chicago sparkled with millions of lights, each one representing someone's dreams, struggles, and aspirations. Somewhere in that vast city, other people were facing their own Derek Morrisons, their own moments of crisis that would define their character and determine their futures. My story had become part of a larger narrative about the power of individual courage to create positive change in the world. The woman who'd been too frightened to open a bonus envelope had evolved into someone willing to fight corruption wherever she found it, and that transformation had enriched every aspect of my life. The legal settlement from Derek's crimes would ensure my financial security for years to come, but more importantly, the experience had taught me that true security comes from trusting in my own abilities and values, rather than hoping that external circumstances will remain stable. As we finished dinner and prepared for another peaceful evening together, I thought about all the people who'd supported me through the investigation and recovery. Tom's steady presence and investigative skills, Patricia's courageous leadership, Janet's decision to tell the truth, despite personal risks, and even Amanda's eventual choice to testify against Derek, had all contributed to our success. The network of support that had emerged from crisis had become a permanent part of my life, a community of people committed to ethical behavior and mutual assistance. We celebrated each other's successes and provided comfort during difficult times, creating relationships that were deeper and more meaningful than anything I'd experienced before Derek's betrayal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities in my expanding career as a fraud prevention consultant and advocate for workplace ethics. But tonight, surrounded by love and security I'd earned through my own courage and integrity, I felt completely at peace with the woman I'd become. The bonus that nearly destroyed my life had ultimately become the catalyst for the most meaningful period of personal growth I'd ever experienced. Derek Morrison had tried to break me, but instead he'd helped me discover just how strong I really was. And as I looked toward the future, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I had the strength, wisdom, and support to face them with confidence and grace. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where standing up for what's right required risking everything you'd worked for? Sometimes our greatest challenges become our most powerful teachers, showing us strength we never knew we had. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with finding courage in difficult times. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming workplace challenges and standing up to corruption. Share it with anyone who might be facing their own professional struggles, and leave a comment about a time when you had to choose between safety and integrity. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to triumph. I hope my experience reminds you that no matter how dark things might seem, there's always hope when you refuse to give up and fight for what's right. Until next time, remember that your integrity is the most valuable asset you'll ever own, and it's worth protecting at any cost. May you find the strength to stand up for justice, the wisdom to recognize true allies, and the courage to become the person you were meant to be.